all of these polls and all of these white mainstream polls, and you break down how they completely underrepresent African Americans. And then the black folks they are counting are folks who actually haven't voted in the past. So just share with folks what you've been seeing as each one of these polls sort of comes out and is talking about, black folks are doing this and black people are doing that, and they're seeing 20 and 25% of black support for Donald Trump.
So I've maintained that the story when it comes to the black electorate for 2024 must be about turnout rather than support for Trump. And these mainstream beltway polls that continue to overestimate support for Trump, we're talking, 20 plus 26, 28% black support for Trump, are doing so mostly based on sample bias and inaccurate and unreliable samples of black folk. On your last segment, they just mentioned, New York Times poll came out today, polling Pennsylvania and Virginia, but within those samples of polls had less than 100 black folk in each state. Therefore, the polling error around that is, 9, 10 percentage points. But in doing so, they're also getting accurate, inaccurate estimates, where in Virginia, they had black support for Trump at about 21%. In doing that, when you then calculate the total support for Biden, you're going to miscalculate those numbers. And you're going to underestimate Biden's actual total margin of win or loss in that type of state based on underestimating and completely missing the mark when it comes to black voters. So I think, right now, unless you're looking at a poll that has upwards of 600 to 800 or more, hopefully black voters in it, so a black specific poll, you can't take those results seriously, and they're biasing the total results of the entire race. And so there's a major problem going on right now when it comes to understanding black vote choice. But I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think we need to worry far more about turnout.
Yep.
To get to the poll.
And that's the point right there, because what I have been saying, the battle is with the couch. And so when we had Adrian Shropshire with Black Pac, they talked about how there was a plus 15 point jump from their most recent poll from the previous poll. And so she said the numbers are trending where they're picking up black support, but what the campaign must be doing, they must be in overdrive. They cannot allow any day to move forward where they're not driving those black numbers because they must be getting to them now, not trying to wait until October.
They need numbers at or above the 2020 numbers for black turnout for the Biden campaign. And it's clear now, in order for Biden to win, he has to pick up Michigan, he has to pick up Pennsylvania, and he's not doing that without historic black numbers. We saw a drop-off in 2016 following Obama. Black voters, in my opinion, didn't really know what to make of the political scene. There wasn't the same excitement. After 4 years of Trump, though, people got to the polls. They changed the electoral map back towards the Democrats. Now, after 4 years of Biden, people have kind of been lulled back into a place where they're not exactly sure what to make of things. They've forgotten in some ways how much of a threat Trump was. A lot of Trump's agenda wasn't able to be executed within those 4 years, but he's coming back for round two. And if Democrats are not hammering home the message that if we don't get out and vote, if black folks don't get out and vote, Trump's going to get back in and get to finish the work that he started, they're not going to pull it off, right? They're not going to win those states. Black voters won't go to the polls. And I wanted to point something out. I think there's been a lot of talk that, Biden's been trying to sell himself, trying to make a case based on his policy agenda. The data that I have suggests that's not going to cut it, right? When we look at things such as student loan support, black support for student loan forgiveness is at 63%. But amongst those low propensity voters, those that are probably or maybe likely to vote, it drops all the way down to 57% and 47%. And so you're going to have to move those people based on a policy argument from somewhat supporting student loan forgiveness to highly supporting it to get them into that certain to vote category, to get them at that same level of support. That's going to be really tough to do, especially in a couple of months. The argument has to be based on Trump, has to be based on the threat that Trump is, and the focus on what Trump, MAGA, and now Project 2025 represent to the black community in the future.
So do you believe that, okay, so if you can't drive a policy argument, is Project 2025 the gateway to reach those voters?
Absolutely. I think, The jury's still out on how much people actually recognize and know about Project 2025. But if you look at the specific policies within there, the agenda within there, and highlight things such as eliminating DEI offices at all levels of education, banning the teaching of Black history to the point where teachers could get jail time if they were caught teaching Black history. If you look at those policies and you highlight those as a main part of Trump's agenda, it's going to resonate and the threat is going to be real. People are going to understand, oh, this is an attack on the Black community. This is an anti-Black policy agenda.
And Omakongo, you first.
I really appreciate the work that you're doing, because this is what so many of us who are not pollsters talk about as it relates to the vibes we get as it relates to what the Black community is thinking. My question is, do you feel like there are other issues outside of Project 2025 that will resonate with these low propensity voters? And I mean, we understand that everything in there affects us directly, but are there other catchphrases that work with them, like voter suppression or, those types of things that you feel like Democrats are missing as it relates to getting their attention?
I think there's a number of policy issues that can resonate, and that will especially resonate with low propensity voters. The trick is Democrats have to find a way to highlight the racial threat that the policy represents. So the specific threat that the policy represents to the Black community. You can't just talk about abortion generally. You have to talk about how abortion is going to disproportionately affect the Black community and continue to increase maternal mortality rates that are already exponentially higher for Black women. You have to make these threats very specific to the Black community, but you could do that on a number of different policy levels when thinking about the attack on education, the attack on reproductive rights, and especially the attack on voting rights, right? All of these things are policy agenda items that Biden has tried to put forth, but has, done so with very little success because of Republican opposition. And so you need to move to the other side of the coin. I've been arguing they've needed to do this for years now, right? To move away from trying to emphasize what we're going to do for you, because that's going to be very difficult in this polarized environment, and really discuss how we need to kind of hold face and make sure that we're not giving up any more ground to the Republican agenda.
Julian?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for lifting up some of these issues. President Biden is going to be speaking to the NAACP and also to Los Unidos this week. What can he say to them that will energize? I mean, I think that Cliff made a good point in the last segment. People are not energized. Republicans are very energized. Democrats are not. What can he say to energize our base?
I think if Biden really wants to energize the Black community, he needs to highly emphasize how Trump not only brings in a racist anti-Black policy agenda, but also allows for sort of society and culture in America to embrace that to a different level, right? It's hard to forget how months after Trump was inaugurated in 2016, there were white supremacist marches all across the country, namely at the University of Virginia, right? Tiki torch marches, very much in line with white supremacist movements of the past. Those are the types of things that Biden has to point out. Biden has to point out how the country will be less safe for Black Americans, how parts of Trump's agenda want to increase policing, want to make it so that police will not receive funding unless they stop and frisk, right? There's just so much there that needs to be highlighted within Trump's agenda, rather than trying to sell Black voters on how great the Democrats are right now. It's very clear, especially since the debates, that many voters, even Black voters, have soured on Biden and the Democratic Party. And there's sort of an unclear path forward. And so in addition to highlighting all of these things, Biden also needs to make clear that if Black people ever want to see continued Black representation, especially at the presidential level or at the congressional level in some of these states that are trying to push voter suppression, they have to keep Trump out the White House. They have to keep him from continuing to nominate justices to the Supreme Court that are suppressing votes, that are rolling back civil rights legislation from the last generation in the last few decades.
Lauren.
Chris, so you said that to Dr. Malveau's question, what can the president do to energize Black voters? And your answer is very well taken, to remind them of the obvious problems with Donald Trump when it comes to the issues that disproportionately impact Black communities and the racial animus, and of course the white grievance campaign that Trump is primarily running. I'm sure you know that a lot of these Democrats who are in control of the party, the consultant class, a lot of them are listening to Jim Carville, who's been telling them to do the exact opposite of what you're suggesting. Which means that, everything is this fear of bringing up anything involving policy that would disproportionately assist Black folks for fear that you're going to tick off white voters, which makes no sense because those white voters are probably not voting for you anyway. Is there any way around that? I mean, I don't see anybody doing that at all. And I was actually at a Trump rally on June 28 in Chesapeake, Virginia. And to say that side is energized would be a massive understatement. And that is because Trump plays to the base, as he did today picking J.D. Vance. The Democrats don't do that. And so I guess what I'm asking you is, do you think that's ever going to change? They're clearly listening to Jim Carville, and they have been for years. Do you think there's any chance that's going to change?
Democrats have been in a precarious position ever since they embraced sort of the civil rights generation of the 1960s, on with the Rainbow Coalition, of having to bring so many different types of people together in order to win national elections. What we find right now, though, is that we are polarized to a point where you're not going to be able to make very convincing arguments to people who have already made their minds up. During the Obama years, things were a bit different. We weren't as polarized. There wasn't such a reaction or backlash to the progress that the country had made. And so it might have been easier to convince people to switch parties or convince conservative independents to vote Democrat. That's not the case anymore. And so Biden absolutely must play to the base, because the base is what's going to bring him home in these swing states, in these battleground states where he needs 2 to 3 points to make up ground and actually win, right? Where he needs that extra 100,000 votes to cross the finish line. If I were Biden tonight, I would have a list of policies, and then I would have another list as to how those policies specifically relate to and disproportionately affect the Black community, and really play up the notion that he's not the savior. He's going to work for the Black community, but right now it's about protecting the country from Trump, from MAGA, and from this conservative agenda.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
I'm blowing up like you thought I, and if you don't know.